All right, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're taking a closer look at Haidilao's Q3 2024 earnings.
Yeah,
They're a pretty big deal in the hot pot world, a global powerhouse, you might say.
absolutely. Yeah.
So their performance, it kind of gives us this peek into like the global dining trends, especially when it comes to, Asian cuisine.
Right. Yeah.
And we've got a lot to work with here. We've got the earnings release A&D, the transcript from the analyst call.
Yeah,
So
we got it all.
where you get the numbers, A&D will hear what all the experts are saying about it.
It's going to be fascinating to see what's going on behind the scenes, right? Not just the numbers themselves, but the strategies, the challenges, everything that kind of shapes Haidilau's journey.
Yeah, exactly. So let's jump right into it. Let's talk about those headline numbers. Revenue is up 14.6% year over year,
Okay.
reaching a cool $199 million USD.
Nice.
That sounds pretty impressive.
Yeah. At first glance, yeah, definitely. But I think we need to look a little bit deeper, right? If we consider the overall economic climate, things are a bit uncertain.
For sure.
This growth, it's pretty much in line with what analysts were expecting. So the big question is, can Haidilao keep this momentum going, right? As costs are going up and competition is increasing.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And it kind of leads us to the operating profit margin, which is sitting at 7.5%.
Right?
It's an improvement, right,
Yeah.
compared to the last couple quarters.
It is.
But it's still, I don't know, a little bit thin, especially in this environment.
Yeah, it's definitely on the thinner side. And the analysts on the call, they were really interested in figuring out what's driving that margin, and whether or not it's actually sustainable in the long run. For example, labor costs kept coming up as a topic of discussion.
Yeah, for sure. So before we dive into the details of the analyst call, let's break down those revenue numbers a bit more, right? Like what's actually fueling this growth?
Right. So table turnover rate, that's a really key metric here. And Haidilao, they hit 3.8 rounds this quarter. Now, for folks who aren't familiar with that, it means each table was used on average by 3.8 different groups of customers
Wow.
during, a given period. So that's actually a slight increase from the previous quarters, which is pretty impressive because they were already operating at like a really high level.
That's true. Yeah. So they're getting more people in the door, but are those people spending more? Right?
Yep.
Like what about the average spend per customer?
Well, that's up too by $2.01 USD to be exact. Now, this could be a bunch of things, right? Could be strategic price increases. Maybe customers are just ordering more food. Who knows?
Yeah.
But don't forget, they did launch that special Olympic-themed menu this quarter, so that might have something to do with it.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I remember that. I remember seeing that. That's pretty smart, right?
Yeah.
Capitalize on a big event, get people excited, try something new.
Absolutely, yeah. It shows that Haidilao is like, they're thinking outside the box. They're thinking about how to attract customers,
Right.
how to drive sales beyond just opening more restaurants. Okay, but let's move on. Let's talk about management initiatives because this is where things get really interesting.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack those. What are they actually doing to boost their efficiency and navigate this tricky market?
Well, one big focus for them is operational efficiency, right? And they have this approach they call the 3 spreadsheets approach.
3 spreadsheets.
Basically, it boils down to giving individual store managers a lot more control over their operations. It's like, think of it this way. It's like giving each shift manager their own mini profit and loss statement, a mini P&L.
Wow.
So that level of detail, it allows managers to make decisions, real-time decisions based on data.
Okay, so they're giving more power to the people on the ground.
It's exactly closest to the action. It's like empowering each restaurant to operate as its own kind of mini business.
Right, exactly.
But are they giving them too much too soon? Because they're also testing this dual management policy where, like, top performers are taking on a second location.
That's right. And that's where things got a little bit heated in the analyst call, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Some analysts, they were concerned about, is this sustainable?
Yeah.
Could this lead to burnout among those high-performing managers?
Yeah, it definitely sounds like a lot to juggle.
It is. It is.
It's a big bet on their top talent.
It is. And it leads us perfectly into the heart of this analyst call,
Okay.
where we can really see what challenges and opportunities Haidilao is facing.
Perfect, yeah. Let's dive into that. What were some of the hot topics that came up?
Well, one of the biggest concerns, it was all about labor costs, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was this analyst from CICC.
A big Chinese investment bank, and they said, and I quote here, This year, we added people to improve customer satisfaction. So is there room for further optimization of store labor in the future?
Okay.
So you can really see that tension there, right? Between maintaining that high level of service that Haidilao is known for
Right.
and also trying to control those costs in a tight labor market.
Yeah, yeah. It's a classic dilemma, right?
Yeah.
Especially for any kind of service-oriented business.
Yeah.
You want to provide a great customer experience,
Yeah.
but that usually means more staff,
Yeah.
and that cuts into your profits, you know? So how did Haidilao respond to this?
Well, they admitted that, labor costs, they are a rigid part of their business model. Mrs. Xu, the CFO, she said, and again, I'm quoting here, to ensure customer satisfaction, this level is still within a reasonable range. In the future, we will increase the base of revenue and improve the efficiency of store operations. But to ensure the quality of in-store service, we believe the labor ratio is still relatively rigid. Significant reduction is not very realistic.
So it sounds like they're walking a pretty fine line there, right? They're committed to excellent service, even if it means higher costs.
Right.
But they're also looking for ways to improve efficiency and boost revenue to kind of offset those costs.
Exactly. It's a balancing act. It'll be really interesting to see how they manage that going forward.
Yeah.
But labor costs weren't the only thing on people's minds. Competition was a hot topic too, especially in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, there was an analyst from Wadai Securities,
Okay.
another big name in the Chinese financial market, and they brought this up.
Mm-hmm.
They said, and I quote, "Is there any change in the competitive landscape, and how do we grasp the competitive trend in the future?" So they're basically asking, how does Hailao plan to stay ahead of the game as more and more Chinese hot pot brands are, expanding internationally?
Right. Yeah.
Uh,
It's like a hot pot showdown brewing on the global stage.
It is. So how did they respond to that? Did they reveal any secret weapons or strategies?
Well, they really emphasize their focus on customer experience
So
and maintaining those, reasonable prices.
right.
They see that as their long-term competitive strategy. So it seems like they're really betting on their reputation for quality and value
Mm.
to set them apart from the competition.
Okay, yeah, it's a classic strategy, but I wonder if it's enough in such a crowded market.
Right.
What about their pomegranate project, right?
Right.
We talked about this a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
Analysts seem pretty curious about these new brands, like the halal hot pot and the noodle shop concepts.
Yeah, the pomegranate project definitely got their attention, yeah. One analyst even asked if they had any, quote, relatively mature new brands that they could share more details about. So it's clear that investors are, they're watching closely to see if Haidilao can really pull off this diversification, without, taking their focus away from that core hot pot business.
Yeah, so what do they say about these new ventures? Are they ready to take over the world with their halal hot pot?
Well, not quite. They were pretty cautious in their response, actually, admitting that, none of the new brands are very mature yet.
Mm.
They emphasize that, building a successful brand, it takes time,
Yeah.
and they're still facing, quote, many new challenges and difficulties.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. It's easy to underestimate how complex it is to launch a new brand, right?
Totally.
Especially in the food industry. But did they give any insights into how these new brands are actually performing? Any early wins or struggles?
They did. They shared a few interesting things. Miss Yang, the CEO, she revealed that their halal hot pot concept is, quote, close to breaking even,
Oh,
which is encouraging, right?
yeah.
But she also added that the, quote, product and service still need to be improved. They also mentioned that their noodle restaurant in the U.S., that's actually turned profitable
Oh,
after some initial adjustments to, the operations.
So a mixed bag so far.
Yeah, mixed bag. It seems like they're learning as they go, which, is to be expected with any new venture.
Right.
But speaking of new ventures, analysts also wanted to know about their plans for, expanding into new markets.
Mhm.
They asked about, how do they plan to adapt to different cultures, different tastes,
Yeah, that's a key question, right? It's one thing to be the hot pot king in one country, but to replicate that success globally, that takes some serious understanding of local preferences.
Absolutely, yeah. And Haidilao, they really stressed their commitment to localization, you know?
Okay.
They talked about incorporating local ingredients, tailoring their menus to regional tastes, and also building strong local teams.
Yeah, that makes sense. You need people on the ground who understand the market, right?
Right.
But did they give any specific examples of how they're approaching localization in different regions?
They did. Mr. Xu explained that in Southeast Asia, they're focusing on hiring local staff
Okay.
and they're incorporating regional flavors into the menu. She even mentioned their tender pork belly dish in Singapore, which he said has been a big hit with customers.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah, tapping into those local culinary traditions right,
Yes.
to create a more authentic experience.
Right.
But, adapting to local tastes, that's just one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
Analysts were also really interested in Haidilao's plans to optimize their supply chain, especially with those rising food costs we talked about earlier.
Yeah, that's a big one. Can they keep those ingredient costs under control?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
Because their ability to manage those costs, it's going to have a huge impact on their profitability.
Absolutely. So what insights did they give into their supply chain strategy?
Well, Miss Chu, she outlined their approach, and it involves consolidating sourcing for major ingredients
Okay.
and leveraging their scale to negotiate better prices with suppliers. So essentially, it's a bulk buying strategy,
Right.
aiming to reduce costs by purchasing in large quantities.
Classic strategy.
Yeah,
Makes sense given their size and reach.
it does.
But did they say how much they expect to save through these supply chain improvements?
They were a little hesitant to give any specific numbers, which is understandable.
Yeah.
With commodity prices, they can be pretty volatile.
Sure.
But Ms. Chu did say that they're confident they have, quote, opportunities to achieve certain progress in reducing costs, even without considering those, potential price fluctuations.
Okay, so a cautiously optimistic outlook on the cost front.
I'd say so.
This analyst call is really like a pressure cooker.
It is.
It's revealing so much about Haidilao's, challenges and opportunities.
Yeah.
It's clear that they're facing a pretty complex global landscape, right?
They are.
With rising costs, fierce competition, and, the pressure to innovate while staying true to their roots.
Yeah, finding that balance, right.
Yeah.
But, their focus on that customer experience, operational excellence, and that strategic expansion, it suggests they're in a good position to navigate those challenges.
I agree. It's fascinating to see how they're juggling all those different priorities.
It is. And, one interesting point that came up was about, how each region is performing
Mm-hmm.
and what the outlook is, especially with the macroeconomic environment being a bit shaky.
Right.
Analysts wanted to know what's the outlook for table turnover rates
Okay.
and customer orders in the coming quarters.
Makes sense. Investors always want to know what's coming next.
Exactly. So did Haidilao give any specific guidance on those, key metrics?
Yeah. What'd they say?
Well, they were careful not to, make any concrete predictions.
Yeah.
But Ms. Yu did offer some insights. She acknowledged that year-over-year growth in table turnover rates, it might slow down a bit because, they had such a high base from previous quarters.
Right.
But she said they're still aiming for continued improvement. It's a realistic assessment, right?
Yeah.
They recognize that maintaining that same pace of growth, it's going to be tough, but they're not giving up on pushing for progress.
So setting realistic expectations, but still striving for excellence.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
What about customer orders? Did they share any thoughts on how they plan to attract diners in this current environment?
Well, they emphasize the importance of attracting customers during off-peak hours, particularly in the evenings.
Yes.
They see potential in tapping into that late-night dining scene,
Yeah.
could boost overall sales, and it allows them to, make better use of their existing capacity.
It's a smart strategy. Maximize those tables.
Absolutely.
Those hot pots bubbling all day long.
Yeah, exactly.
So we've covered labor costs, competition, new brands, regional performance. What else were the analysts grilling Haidilao about?
Yeah, what else?
Anything else stand out to you?
Oh, yeah. One analyst from Haitong Securities, they had a really good question about long-term growth
Okay.
and, store expansion.
Yeah.
They wanted to know how Haidilao is like viewing the potential in different regions, right? What's their strategy for going into these new markets?
Yeah, it's not just about opening more restaurants. It's about choosing the right locations, right?
Right.
Making sure those restaurants can actually, like, thrive.
Exactly.
So did Haidilao give any, like, clues on how they're approaching this?
Yeah, they talked about using a data-driven approach.
Okay.
They said they don't have like these hard limits on store openings in any specific market, you know.
Right.
Instead, they carefully analyze all these factors like local demographics, dining habits, the competition.
So they're not just, like, throwing darts at a map.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a strategic.
Calculated.
Yeah.
Very calculated.
Did they give any hints about specific regions that they're eyeing?
They were a little bit secretive about specific targets,
Okay.
but they did say that they see opportunities for both infill growth, so adding more restaurants in existing markets,
Okay.
and also expansion into, totally new territories.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
They seem pretty confident about bringing that Haidilao experience to, like, new parts of the world.
They do.
You've covered so much: growth drivers, management initiatives, those analyst concerns, future plans.
Yeah, we did a lot.
Before we wrap up, I did want to touch on their commitment to, technology and innovation.
Okay.
Did that come up at all in the analyst call?
It did, though it wasn't like the main focus.
Mm-hmm.
But they did highlight some ongoing efforts to, use technology to improve the customer experience and also to boost their operational efficiency. For example, they talked about using data analytics
Okay.
to optimize menu planning and inventory management.
I mean, data is king these days, right? So it sounds like they're using it to their advantage.
Absolutely, yeah. They're definitely on top of that.
Did they mention anything about, like, other tech advancements, like automation? I know some restaurants are playing around with, like, robot servers and things like that.
They did actually, yeah, briefly.
Oh.
They talked about exploring automation in some areas like food prep and delivery.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like they're keeping an eye on those advancements
Yeah.
and how they could potentially fit into their operations.
Awesome. Well, I think we've covered it all, right?
Yeah, I think so.
We dissected Haidilau's Q3 2024 earnings.
We did.
We went through that analyst call.
Yep.
Uncovered a ton of insights about their growth strategy, the challenges they're facing, and their vision for the future.
It was a good deep dive.
It was a fascinating deep dive.
It was.
I'm curious to see how those new brands,
Yeah.
like, develop,
Yeah.
and if they'll be able to maintain that really impressive growth and those table turnover rates.
Right. A lot to keep an eye on.
Yeah, a lot to watch.
Definitely.
Well, that's a wrap for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us.